Under the blazing midday sun, a poor girl did not hesitate to take a frail old beggar home to shelter temporarily beneath the rickety thatched roof of her hut. No one could have imagined that this single small act would uncover a truth so shocking it would leave her entire family in tears. Today we bring you a story about unconditional kindness and about a hidden identity concealed beneath tattered rags. If it were you, would you be willing to open your arms the way that girl did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. It was a sweltering noon. The countryside sun seemed to scorch the skin waves of hot air blowing straight into one's face. Mary trudged along the red dirt road leading to the district market, a basket of leftover bread from the morning hanging from her hand. The conical hat on her head shaded her a little from the glaring sunlight, but not enough to stop sweat from soaking the back of her shirt. The shrill buzzing of cicadas from the almond trees lining both sides of the road only made the heat more oppressive, suffocating. Mary sighed. Her bare feet smeared with red dust moved slowly toward home as her thoughts drifted to a dinner of nothing more than wild greens and a handful of cold rice. She was used to being poor. At least her heart was still at peace. As she passed a large banyan tree, Mary suddenly stopped. An old man lay curled up beneath the sparse shade. His faded brown shirt was torn at the elbows, his sun-darkened face lined with age, white hair falling messily over half of his forehead. He looked pitifully worn out. In front of him lay an upturned straw hat with only a few sweat-damp coins scattered inside. Mary pressed her lips together, her heart sinking. The sight awakened memories of her grandmother Linda's constant reminder, help others without expecting repayment. Heaven and earth will see it. Mary set her basket down, hesitated for a moment, then bent over and asked softly, "Sir, are you all right?" The old man slowly opened his eyes. They weren't dull as Mary had expected, but bright, clear, and alert. A tired smile appeared on his lips. "I'm fine," he said gently. "Just a little hungry, that's all." Without a second thought, Mary rummaged through her basket, took out a whole loaf of bread, and placed it in the old man's hands. His eyes lit up with gratitude, but then he quietly said, "Thank you, child. This bread is very precious." Mary sat down beside him and wiped the sweat from her own forehead, her gaze thoughtful. "The sun's so harsh. How can you stay out here like this? Why don't you come home with me, rest for a bit, have a bowl of rice to regain your strength?" The old man looked at her for a long moment, his eyes strange and contemplative, then slowly nodded. The road back to Mary's house was already deserted. Now it held two crooked shadows, one young one, old stretching beneath the sun. The scene did not escape the notice of the women selling drinks at the roadside. One scoffed, joking that the girl was bringing trouble upon herself. Another shook her head in concern, but Mary paid them no mind. She told herself that if she didn't help and something happened to the old man, how could she live with it? When they reached the gate, Grandma Suliyu, Mary's grandmother, was sweeping the yard. She looked up, her eyes landing on the unfamiliar old man, and immediately frowned. "Who is this?" she asked. Mary lowered her head and answered timidly, "He's an old man who was hungry by the roadside. I felt sorry for him, so I brought him back to rest for a bit. He'll leave afterward." Grandma Linda put her hands on her hips, her eyes filled with both suspicion and worry. "These days, there are plenty of people who pretend to be poor to cause trouble. Don't be foolish." The old man, whose name Mary would later learn was BYHA, only smiled kindly, a glimmer of something indescribable shining in his eyes. He spoke gently, "I won't be any trouble. I'm just asking to rest for a short while, then I'll leave." Mary led him to the cool back porch, set down an old wooden cot for him. She poured him a glass of cold water. Linda remained standing in the yard, her sharp eyes quietly following every movement. Dinner that evening was nothing more than a pot of Malabar spinach soup, a plate of heavily salted braised fish, and some cold leftover rice. Mary set out an extra bowl for BYHA. The old man ate slowly, each mouthful as if he were savoring it, cherishing every grain. The atmosphere at the meal was hesitant, restrained. Grandma Sue occasionally glanced at him, her expression still uneasy. Mary said nothing, only quietly adding a bit more fish to his bowl. Just as the silent meal went on, BYH suddenly looked up, stared straight at Mary, and asked in a warm yet oddly suggestive voice, "If one day you found out I wasn't the kind of person you thought I was, would you chase me away?" The question swept through the small kitchen like a cold gust of wind. Linda froze mid-motion, her chopsticks hovering. Mary's eyes widened. Before she could answer, BYHA had already lowered his head and continued eating as if he had never said a word. Mary looked at him, a strange feeling rising in her chest. There was something unusual about this beggar, unlike the destitute people she had seen on the streets. He carried himself with calm composure, his eyes bright, his voice steady, as if nothing in this world could truly shake him. That night, as the wind shifted and dark clouds gathered thick along the horizon, Mary tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Outside on the porch, the unfamiliar old man lay quietly. Inside the poor house, only the steady knock-knock of Linda's wooden pestle echoed from the kitchen like a reminder. Help others with a kind heart, but keep clear eyes as well. Mary pulled the thin, threadbare blanket around herself, her mind full of unease. She wasn't afraid he would harm her, but his words from dinner kept echoing in her head like an omen. Who was that man really? And should she truly open her heart and offer him a place to stay? A flash of lightning split the sky, casting a cold white streak of light into the house. In that instant, Mary sensed that her quiet life was about to turn down a path she had never imagined. A rooster crowed, tearing through the stillness of the night. Under the dim oil lamp by the porch, Mary sat hunched over, mending Grandma Sue's shirt, its shoulders worn thin. The needle rose and fell slowly, her eyes squinted under the weak light. A breeze drifted in from the fields, carrying the scent of freshly dried straw, mixed with the damp, earthy smell of the village pond behind the house. In one corner of the yard, BYHA was bent over, patiently picking up stray vegetable leaves, moving with the quiet diligence of a seasoned farmer. His thin back curved beneath the old brown shirt. His rough hands gathered each stem with care. The lamplight barely outlined his figure like a silent shadow. From time to time, Mary looked up, her gaze lingering on that silhouette. She thought of Linda's words. "We may be poor, but we must be poor with dignity." Those words had been etched into her heart since childhood, a silent reminder. And that stranger, though not bound by blood, seemed to live by that same code of humble decency. Since the day Mary brought him home, BYHA had never complained. He never asked for anything extra, only requested small chores to repay the meals and a place to sleep. The thatched roof, riddled with holes from early season storms, had been patched by him with newly gathered palm leaves carefully woven together. The banana trees behind the house, overgrown with weeds, were quietly cleared and tidied up. Grandma Sue, though still uneasy inside, let things be. From time to time, she deliberately passed by where he worked, her eyes probing, but she found nothing amiss. Still, her caution smoldered like hidden embers waiting for a chance to flare up. One afternoon, as Mary carried a basket of vegetables back from the garden, she suddenly stopped at the doorstep. Under the porch, BYHA was brewing tea, but not in the rough, careless way of village folk who simply poured hot water to quench their thirst. His movements were slow and deliberate, rinsing the teapot, warming the cups, pouring the water in a thin, silk-like stream. The tea's fragrance spread through the air, elegant and refined, nothing like the cheap tea Linda usually bought at the market. Mary stood watching, her heart stirred by an indescribable feeling. How could a beggar wandering from street to street brew tea like a learned scholar? And it didn't stop there. In casual conversations with Linda and Mary, the old man would occasionally utter refined phrases, his words carefully chosen, never clumsy. At times, he recounted ancient customs and old tales fluently, as if he had lived through those eras himself. Linda frowned at a vague unease stirring within her. She had seen many people disguise themselves as the poor to deceive others, yet this man showed no greed or demands, only an almost excessive politeness, which made her all the more wary. That night, the air turned damp and cold, as dew drifted in from the fields. After folding the mended clothes, Mary went out into the yard to shake them out. When she returned, she caught sight of something strange. Under the pale moonlight, by the corner of the garden, Bha was squatting before an old stone stele, half buried beneath weeds. It was a relic from her great-grandfather's time, carved with Chinese characters few villagers could still read. The old man leaned forward, brushed the moss from the stone with his sleeve, then softly began to read aloud. Each classical character flowed clear and precise, the rhythm flawless, his tone pure and resonant in the still night. The cadence, the pronunciation, everything was so polished that it could not possibly be something learned by imitation. Mary hid behind a pillar, holding her breath as she listened, amazement mixed with a trace of fear welling up inside her. She quietly retreated indoors, her heart pounding, questions piling up in her mind. How could an ordinary beggar read ancient Chinese texts? Who was he? Why had he ended up here? She peeked out the window. Byha's shadow stretched long across the earthen yard, lonely, mysterious. After finishing the reading, he silently stood up, brushed the dust from his clothes, and slowly disappeared into the darkness. His gait was unhurried, yet utterly lacking the dejection of a wretched man. Instead, it belonged to someone seasoned by life, someone who had endured and overcome countless storms. Mary gently lowered the cloth curtain, her heart heavy. She realized that the old man living under their poor thatched roof was far more than he appeared. Every gesture, every look, every word carried a kind of bearing that years of hardship alone could never erase. As the night deepened, the wind rustled through the bamboo groves at the edge of the hamlet. Crickets chirped, frogs croaked in the distance. Mary lay awake, clutching her old pillow, her mind spinning with endless possibilities. Who could he be? A wandering scholar, a man ruined by misfortune, or someone carrying a great secret hiding from the world? In the next room, Linda too lay restless, unable to find sleep. Even though she had not witnessed him reading the stone study with her own eyes, her intuition told her that the figure under this thatched roof would bring no small changes to her life and to little Mary's. That night, beneath a sky full of stars inside the poor thatched house, the three of them, each carrying a private burden, were quietly stepping into a journey none of them yet realized. At dawn the next morning, when the dew was still light as smoke over the corn patch behind the house, Mary struggled out to the well carrying a basin of clothes. A faint breeze passed through, bringing with it the earthy scent of damp soil, mixed with the simple, sweet fragrance of corn blossoms. Mary squatted by the well and dipped Bha's old shirt into the water. The fabric was faded and frayed thin as paper, yet he wore it day after day without complaint. As she gently scrubbed the hem, Mary thought to herself how strange this old man was. His courteous manners, his unhurried gait, his profound knowledge of letters, all of it seemed utterly at odds with his worn-out appearance. Suddenly her hand froze when it touched something hard inside the shirt pocket. She frowned, reached in and pulled it out. A small, heavy object dropped into her palm, a silver necklace darkened with age. Yet the delicate patterns engraved on its surface were still clearly visible, lotus petals blooming softly as if dancing under moonlight. Mary's heart began to race. She turned the necklace over and over her fingers, tracing in every intricate line. No matter how old the silver was, this could never have belonged to an ordinary beggar. Stories she had once heard from old Mr. Peter flooded her mind. In the past, only wealthy families could afford silver engraved with lotus motifs. Those who wore such jewelry were at least of distinguished lineage. Mary glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then hurriedly slipped the necklace back into the pocket, folded the shirt neatly, pretending nothing had happened. But her heart would not settle. A wave of doubt rose up, swallowing all the naive trust she had felt at first. All morning long, Mary was distracted, clumsy at whatever she did. Linda noticed but did not ask right away. The old woman was shrewd. One glance at her granddaughter's absent eyes was enough to tell her something was being hidden. Meanwhile, Alex remained completely at ease, as if nothing had happened. He bent over, pulling weeds by the water spinach bed, occasionally wiping sweat from his brow, with his torn sleeve, a toothless smile always on his lips. That calm demeanor only confused Mary further. If he knew he had lost the necklace, he should have been worried searching for it. Yet by afternoon, while Mary was still fussing with the stove, Linda quietly slipped out the gate and headed to Aunt Tung's house at the start of the lane. Linda pretended to ask about buying some sweet potato greens and casually inquired whether anyone in the village had lost anything that day. Aunt Tuong raised an eyebrow, hands on her hips. "What did your place lose something?" Linda shook her head, smiling evasively. "No, I was just asking. Things have been pretty chaotic lately." Aunt Tung waved it off. "Haven't heard of anyone losing anything. But you be careful, these days there are thieves pretending to be disabled people." Hearing that, Linda felt half convinced, half doubtful. She returned home and leaned against a pillar, her eyes following Alex as he watered the young vegetable patch. His diligent figure, thin and gentle, made her hesitate again and again, but then the image of the silver necklace resurfaced. How could a real beggar possess something so valuable? Was he hiding something? A past and identity? Or even a crime that evening? Dinner passed in a stifling atmosphere. Alex still smiled kindly, picking out tiny pieces of fried egg for Mary. He chatted lightly about old-time stories of talking starlings, of mudfish escaping floods. Mary listened, but her mind drifted far away. Linda, meanwhile, kept staring at him, her eyes filled with calculation. After the meal, Alex asked permission to go out to the garden to look at the moon. Mary sat mending her own shirt, while Linda, after a long silence, murmured, "Once you're done sewing, go to bed first. I want to tidy up a bit more." Mary nodded obediently, though unease lingered in her heart. She turned off the lamp, pretended to lie down, but quietly cracked the door open to watch her grandmother. Linda, holding a dim oil lamp, crept toward the small room where Alex was sleeping temporarily. Mary's heart tightened. She didn't know what she was hoping to discover, a shocking secret proof of deception, or merely traces of a painful past. The flickering lamplight illuminated each of Grandma Sue's steps. The rickety wooden door trembled softly under her hand. She took a deep breath and slowly pushed it open. The tilted lamp cast her shadow across the earthen floor. But at that very moment, a figure silently appeared behind the door. It was B.Y. Ha. He stood there straight-backed, his eyes calm like an autumn lake. No surprise, no anger, no agitation, just a quiet presence strong enough to make Linda start and step back. "Grandma Sue, were you looking for me?" His voice was warm and low, neither loud nor soft, yet it pierced straight into the doubts in her heart, like the tip of a sharp blade. Flustered, Linda hid the lamp behind her back and stammered, I, I was just checking if there was a draft in the room. Didn't want you to sleep cold." Alex smiled faintly, a smile half understanding, half distant. He did not expose her clumsy lie. He simply stepped out into the yard, his gaze lifting toward the vast, dark sky. From inside her room, Mary watched his silhouette stretch across the ground like a lonely brushstroke on the still canvas of night. A surge of emotions welled up inside her. Sorrow, suspicion, compassion entwined, entangled in the cool night wind as the corn leaves rustled softly. The story of the lotus-engraved silver necklace of secrets yet unrevealed seemed to close in around the small thatched house, pulling everyone inside into a vortex from which there was no easy escape. The crackling fire in the old wood stove cast the shadows of the three figures onto the earthen wall, crooked shapes like silent ghosts. Outside, rain pattered softly. Now and then a gust of wind rattled the door, sending chills up the spine. Inside the small house, the air felt thick and heavy, broken only by the popping of embers, and Grandma Sully used deep-weighted sighs. Under her gaze, heavy with suspicion, and Mary's look of confused unease, Alex sat quietly, his gaunt hand caressing the old ceramic cup, as if seeking a bit of warmth for a soul weathered by many storms. At last, Linda could no longer hold it in. She set her chopsticks down hard on the tray of cold food, her voice hoarse with emotion. "Sir, could you please tell me the truth so Mary and I can hear it?" So why were you hiding that silver bracelet in your clothes? She demanded. What kind of beggar carries something so valuable around with him? The air seemed to choke. The firelight cast B.Y. Hayes' shadow onto the wall, stretching it long and distorted. The old man let out a slow, heavy breath. Deep in his sunken eyes flickered a numbing sadness. Yes, he said, at last, his voice low and hoarse like stone grinding against a cliff. I do carry a few old belongings. They're remnants of a life long past. He raised his head and looked straight into Grandma Sue's eyes, neither evasive nor defiant. I'm not truly a beggar. He paused as if weighing every word. I only needed a place to shelter through the few days I have left. Outside, the rain pattered against the thatched roof, mingling with Mary's stifled breaths. Linda found her voice slow but guarded. Then who are you? Why did you end up here? Did you do something wrong that you have to hide like this? Alex pressed his lips together. His trembling hands clutched the torn hem of his shirt. In that moment, he seemed to have aged 10 years, a worn-out body struggling against the cruel current of fate. No, he said softly, his gaze still unfathomably deep. I've never killed anyone, never stolen or robbed. But I do have a past that can't be explained in just a few words. He stopped letting his words sink in. Once I was a man of standing. My family lived comfortably. But the tides of the country turned, our fortune collapsed, and my loved ones scattered. I lost everything. My reputation, my wealth, even my faith in people. Mary fell silent. The story was vague, yet every word, every breath he took carried a sincerity that could not be denied. Linda, however, remained unconvinced. She crossed her arms and tilted her head, her tone sharpening. That all sounds very nice, but these days people are full of stories about their pasts just to scam others. Alex lowered his head, his voice thick with emotion. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm only asking for a corner of the house, a bit of leftover rice and broth in return. I'll work. I'll do whatever I can. And when you feel you can't tolerate me anymore, I'll leave. The words were simple, yet they weighed like 1,000 pounds. In the flickering firelight, Mary saw tears silently sliding down the old man's hollow cheeks. A man so weathered, so patient in his suffering, how could he be wicked? A long silence followed. Outside, the rain continued to fall steadily. The wind rattled the bamboo screen as if whispering of the fragility of human life. Mary bit her lip, her heart torn violently in two. Reason told her to be cautious, but her heart's soft sensitive told her she could not abandon someone so desperately alone. She suddenly stood up, stepped into the middle of the kitchen, clasped her hands, and bowed before Grandma. Sue, tears welling up. Mom, please let Uncle B.Y. stay, she pleaded. Whatever his past is right now, he's just an old man who's fallen on hard times. Linda glared at her daughter. Her aged face tightened, contorted by layers of emotion. She had spent a lifetime watching human hearts turn black and white, and suspicion had sunk deep into her bones. But seeing her daughter's pleading eyes and the old man's resigned posture, she let out a long breath as if setting down a heavy burden of doubt. All right, she nodded slowly. I'm old now, too. I've known hardship myself. You can stay, but remember your promise. Don't bring trouble into my house. Alex bowed deeply, his voice trembling. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mary. I'll remember this kindness for the rest of my life. The cold meal was reheated. The three of them sat together, forcing smiles and conversation. Outside on the porch, the rain began to let up, leaving only droplets tapping softly on the thatched roof like unspoken words lingering in the air. Not far away behind a dense clump of ivy gourd vines, a dark figure stood silently watching. Hidden in the night, that person's eyes flashed with cold calculation. In the night breeze, his breathing blended with the faint sounds of the dying rain, as if heralding an unseen undercurrent quietly rising, ready to sweep away the fragile peace beneath that thatched roof. Whispers soon began at the tea stall at the head of the lane, a rickety wooden table under a banyan tree, surrounded by a few dirt-stained plastic stools. Aunt Ba's stall had long been a place not just for tea, but for every bit of village gossip. That morning, after the night rain had just ended, mist still clung to the sky. The women gathered around the stall cups of strong tea steaming on the table, while the conversation was hotter than the midday summer sun. "Hey, have you heard?" Aunt Ba lowered her voice, glancing up and down the lane. "Grandma Suli, you brought a stranger home to stay." Uncle Tam, who often sat in to drink tea, frowned. "You mean that old beggar from the other day? Not even a relative, and she let him live there. I don't get it." The whispers spread like wind through a draft, each person adding embellishments, twisting a story of kindness into harboring a debtor on the run, or even helping a fugitive escape without knowing it. T. Minhayan, who lived in the upper hamlet, happened to pass by the stall and caught bits of the talk. His face went pale. He didn't even stop to buy his usual cup of tea, but turned and ran straight to Mary's house. Mary was sweeping the yard, the soft scrape of the broom, mingling with the chirping of crickets in the damp grass. Seeing the men storm toward her, she dropped the broom in surprise. "Men, what's gotten into you?" she asked. He barely had time to catch his breath before snapping, "Mary, do you know what people are saying all over the village? They're saying your mom, your whole house brought a stranger in, and that he'll bring disaster." Mary was startled. Since taking Alex in, she had only worried about food and medicine, never once thinking about gossip. "They're saying he's a debtor on the run," T-Min nearly shouted. "Maybe even a criminal." Mary pressed her lips together, feeling the cold seep into her palms. Inside the house, Linda heard the commotion. She pushed the door open, still holding a bunch of freshly picked sweet potato greens. "What's he saying, Min?" she asked quietly. Min exhaled, hard worry filling his eyes. "The whole village is talking. Auntie, you should reconsider. These days, no one's truly kind. Who wanders around begging with valuables on them?" The air grew heavy. Only the wind rustling through the corn behind the house could be heard, sounding like a long sigh. Linda stood still, her face wrinkled like the greens in her hand. She knew all too well. Here, one rumor, one bad word was enough to destroy a person's reputation for life. Mary hesitated. "But Uncle BY hasn't hurt anyone. He works quietly, fixes the roof, cleans the yard." T-Min cut her off harshly. "That's exactly why it's scary. Guilty people are the ones who hide themselves." The words sliced into Mary's heart like a knife. She turned away, hiding her reddened eyes. Linda remained silent for a long moment, then sighed heavily. She looked at her daughter, at T-Min, then out at the rain-soaked yard. "What do you say isn't wrong?" she said slowly. "We may be poor, but we have to be clean. I don't want the neighbors looking down on us." She turned to Mary. "From now on, if Uncle B.I. wants to stay, he has to find his own work. He has to prove he's not a bad man. I can't shield anyone forever." Mary bit her lip, her throat tightening, unable to speak. She knew her mother was right. In this village, rumors were more poisonous than a bad wind. Once you were dragged through the mud, no amount of explaining could ever wash it clean. Just then, from behind the house, the sound of slow footsteps approached. Alex appeared, hunched over his patched clothes, frayed and threadbare. He stepped out and stopped short when he saw the three of them, his eyes gentle yet full of quiet understanding. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I've caused trouble for the family. If you need me to, I'll leave." His voice was calm, no resentment, no pleading, only the resignation of someone long accustomed to being turned away. Linda looked at the old man, her gaze softening just a little. "No," she said slowly. "If you're sincere, then go find work. There's no shortage of hard labor in this village. Prove yourself first, then we'll talk about staying or leaving." Alex bowed deeply without a word of complaint. "I understand," he said quietly. "Tomorrow I'll go to the district market to look for work." Mary watched his thin figure disappear into the kitchen, her heart tightening. T-Min snorted coldly and walked off, leaving behind a muddy yard and questions with no answers. That afternoon, the sun broke through the clouds. Pale golden light stretched along the narrow lane, glinting off the old thatched roof and the weathered bamboo screens. Yet even that sunlight couldn't dispel the heaviness hanging over the little house. In the kitchen, Linda rinsed rice in silence. Mary tended the fire. Alex sat beneath the almond tree, mending the broken strap of his sandals. Three people, three separate thoughts, bound by the same unspoken worry. Outside, children's laughter echoed, bicycle wheels rattled along the damp dirt road, and the murmurs of gossip still hadn't died down. Night fell. The village sank back into vast darkness. A dim oil lamp cast lonely shadows on the cracked earthen walls. Mary lay listening to the drizzle tapping on the thatch, her thoughts weighing heavily. She knew this was only the beginning. The undercurrents in this small village were unseen but stronger and more dangerous than anything else. Somewhere along the path leading to the riverbank, a shadowy figure stood watching the thatched house. His gaze was as cold as the last wind of the season, promising trouble quietly drawing near. The rainy season had fully arrived. Heavy drops pounded the earth, carrying with them the sharp, muddy smell of wet soil. The village was drowned in gray. The thatched roofs, soaked through the yards, turned into muddy pools. In that bleak chill at the old bricks kiln on the edge of the village, a bent figure carried bricks back and forth tirelessly, as though even if the sky collapsed, he wouldn't stop. It was we home, his brown work clothes drenched mud, caked from head to toe. His rubber sandals, the straps broken, were tied together with a thin piece of rope, slipping on the slick ground. He had found work at the kiln early that morning. The owner, a middle-aged man named Elon, had only meant to test him, assigning him to haul broken bricks from the scrap pile onto an ox cart. A backbreaking job that even strong young men avoided. How much you can do is up to you. If you can't, then quit. I won't force you, Baalem said coldly before walking away. But Alex didn't complain once. He quietly lifted each brick, stacked them into a basket, and hoisted it onto his bony shoulders. The rain grew heavier. The ground turned to sludge, each step sinking deeper. Still he worked on, breathing steadily, eyes fixed and resolute beneath the white curtain of rain. From under the kiln's awning, Baalem watched with folded arms, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He was used to seeing lazy men blame the weather to avoid work, but this old man looked like he wouldn't stop even if the sky fell. Mary stood hidden by the footpath, clutching a bundle of sticky rice still warm with steam. She had followed quietly since morning, her heart heavy with tangled emotions. She saw raindrops soaking into his hunched back, seeping through the patched cloth. She saw his callous, trembling hands lift the heavy basket again and again. At noon, when the wooden clapper sounded for the break, she timidly stepped forward and pressed the food into BYH's hands. Please eat something. I made it and brought it for you. Alex looked up. Though rain streamed down his face, his eyes glowed with a gentle warmth. He accepted the bundle, his hand shaking slightly. Thank you, child. Thank you so much. Without another word, he found a large rock nearby and sat down. Inside the bundle were only a few handfuls of sticky rice, some fermented salt, and a few slices of pickled cucumber. But to him, it was a feast in the depths of hardship. Mary stood by the almond tree, her throat tight, watching him eat slowly and carefully, as if afraid to waste even a fragment of her kindness. The rain didn't stop. Cold gusts swept through the brickyard, yet that bent figure never left his place. The afternoon work grew harder. Wet, broken bricks slipped in the mud. Then one careless step sent him crashing to the ground. Mary screamed and ran towards him. His knee was bleeding, his thin pants torn open to reveal a raw red scrape. Alex frowned slightly, but didn't cry out. He pushed himself up, wiped away the blood mixed with mud, and quietly gathered the scattered bricks as if nothing had happened. Mary wanted to rush forward and help him, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. Baalem and the other kiln workers stared in stunned silence. Baalem hurried over, reaching out, but the old man had already staggered to his feet. This old man's something else, Baalem muttered, respect mingling with disbelief. All afternoon, rain and wind battered the yard, but that small figure kept working, persistent and steadfast like a gnarled tree, refusing to loosen its grip on the earth. Mary sat beneath the almond tree, hugging her knees, eyes following each slow step. Emotions surged, and she had to wipe away the tears threatening to fall. Deep in her heart, something strange took root. Not just pity, but admiration, respect for a man of extraordinary endurance. As night fell, the kiln emptied. Workers drifted home, their laughter cutting through the rain. Alex quietly set down his basket, pulled on his conical hat, and trudged away. Mary ran after him, holding an old raincoat she had prepared. "Put this on, or you'll catch a cold," she said, draping it over his shoulders. Alex stopped and then looked back at the small girl with eyes full of tenderness. "Thank you, child. Thank heaven there are still good people left in this world," he said, his voice breaking. One old, one young, they walked together under the pouring rain along the muddy red road. Behind them, the brickyard lay empty, marked only by smeared trails of mud and blood. And in Mary's heart, a small seed of trust quietly sprouted, despite all the rumors, doubts, and cruel words outside. Tomorrow she would bring him food again. Rain or shine, she would keep watching those footsteps. Because deep down, she believed that sometimes just watching how a person endures life is enough to know who they truly are. The drizzle continued from morning to afternoon, shrouding the village in a murky veil. Frogs croaked across the fields, mingling with the sharp smell of wet mud rising from flooded paddies. Inside the low thatched house, dim light slipped through cracks in the wall, flickering like thin smoke. Mary sat on the porch, deftly mending an old shirt for her mother. The gloomy sky weighed on her heart. With rain like this, her mother couldn't go to the market. And Alex had gone to the kiln since dawn. She didn't know if he was back yet. Out of habit, Mary began tidying the house, hoping to clean, while it rained so things wouldn't mildew later. When she reached the corner of Bihu Yeha's sleeping area, where he had set up an old bamboo bed, a torn mattress, and a dark wooden chest, she stopped. That chest had never left his side since the day he arrived. Wherever he went or slept, it stayed beside him. She had never seen it opened, and no one had ever asked about it, assuming an old beggar owned nothing of value. But today something stirred her. Perhaps the rain, the silence, or the faint light glinting off the chest, making it seem strangely mysterious. She stepped closer and gently brushed the dust from its surface. The chest was old, its paint peeling, yet the carved lotus and flying dragon patterns were exquisitely detailed, nothing like what a poor man would normally own. Mary's hands trembled. She glanced around. No one was there. Linda was in the back preparing dinner. Taking a deep breath, Mary grasped the rusted latch. It snapped open with a dull click. Holding her breath, she slowly lifted the lid. Inside were not rags or ordinary belongings. A layer of yellowed silk lay on top. With shaking hands, Mary lifted it. Beneath was a worn but magnificent brocade robe. The dragon and phoenix embroidery, though faded, still shimmered faintly in the light. Beneath it lay a finely crafted wooden fan engraved with ancient Chinese characters, a bundle of yellowed papers tied with twine, and most striking of all, a small wooden box carved with a blooming lotus. Mary's heart pounded. She had never seen such things in real life. In the past, only mandarins or wealthy families owned items like these. Could it be? At that moment, a hoarse, low voice spoke behind her. "Do you want to know who I am?" Mary jolted, nearly dropping the robe. She spun around to see Alex standing there, sleeves soaked with rain, hair plastered to his head, his face slick with rain and sweat. There was no anger in his expression, only exhaustion and a deep, ancient sadness in his eyes. Mary stammered, I was just cleaning." Alex stepped forward and sat down on the edge of the bamboo bed, his eyes never leaving the wooden chest. He was silent for a long time, as if wrestling with himself. Then slowly he reached into the chest and took out a yellowed letter, its edges crumbling with age. He handed it to Mary. "I've kept this for half my life," he said in a low, hoarse voice. "I only hoped that one day I would find a worthy heir." Mary accepted the letter, her hands trembling. On the envelope, slanted smudged handwriting read, "To my soul heir." The air inside the house seemed to thicken. The sound of rain outside faded away, leaving only the loud thudding of her own heartbeat in her ears. Alex gently closed his eyes and leaned his head against the earthen wall. A long sigh escaped him like a confession. "I once had everything house's land status," he said, "and then I lost it all." He didn't go into detail. Mary didn't dare ask. She just sat there, frozen, clutching the yellowed letter, as if holding a fragment of a fate too heavy to bear. After a long while, Alex opened his eyes again, his gaze distant. Times change. People can go from wealthy to destitute overnight. Things you think you're holding tight can vanish like smoke. He paused, his voice sinking lower. "But there is one thing I have never lost, my faith in people like you." Mary bit her lip as tears welled up. Alex stood gently, closed the lid of the chest, brushed the dust from its wooden surface, then turned to her with a faint smile. "Don't worry, everyone has their own destiny. This chest isn't meant to be fully open just yet." Mary nodded, her heart a tangle of emotions. Outside, the rain still fell lightly. The shadows of the old man and the young girl stretched across the damp ground, blending together in the flickering light. A new chapter of their lives had begun, filled with secrets, yet unrevealed and trials still unseen. And that old wooden chest stood as a silent witness, patiently waiting for the day when all the stories buried within it would finally come to light. Outside, the drizzle continued, each drop tapping through the thatched roof onto the stained earth below. Inside the humble house, the oil lamp flickered, casting yellowed light that revealed every deep wrinkle on the faces of people long accustomed to weathering life's storms. Linda sat by the dying fire, steadily fanning it with a palm leaf fan. From time to time, she looked up at Biha, her eyes filled with both suspicion and pity. Mary sat close by, her young face clouded with worry, staring intently at the old man as he slowly poured tea. The space between them felt heavy, stiflingly quiet. Alex set the battered teapot down on the wooden table. His hands trembled, whether from age or from the turmoil inside it was hard to tell. "I suppose it's time," he murmured. Linda stopped fanning, her sharp gaze cutting toward him, but she said nothing. Mary lowered her head, slightly waiting. Alex looked up. His clouded eyes shone with a strange, stubborn strength. "I'm not a fugitive debtor, and I'm not a real beggar," he began, his voice slow, dragging behind it the weight of memory. "Long ago, I owned a large trading business in the district town. Goods moved in and out, people came and went. Land, fields, cards, everything was once in my hands." Linda flinched slightly and glanced at Mary. The young woman stared wide-eyed at the frail old man before her, hardly able to believe that this thin figure in tattered clothes had once lived such a prosperous life. Alex paused, swallowing hard. Who can foresee betrayal? He went on, his voice subdued, telling how, just after he turned 50, when he believed his future was secure, disaster struck. The cousin he had loved since his childhood, Siu Mang, had secretly plotted to seize everything. "By schemes I never imagined," he said. "He took it all, piece by piece." His voice grew hoarse, his eyes reddening. "Money, property, even trust." He didn't cry, but the tremor in his voice, the way his thin fingers twisted together, laid bare all the pain he had hidden. "When I finally woke up, I had nothing but these bare hands and this old chest." He let out a bitter, self-mocking laugh. Friends turned their backs on him. Family drifted away. The vast town no longer had room for a penniless man like him. Linda clutched the hem of her blouse, deeply moved. She had known poverty, but never betrayal by one's own blood, and she understood at least a part of that bitterness. Alex continued, as if emptying his heart at last. "I left the town alone, drifting through poor villages, trading odd jobs for meals. I pretended to be a beggar because I had no other choice. These rags, this torn cloth, they were the shield hiding the last scraps of my dignity." He stopped speaking and looked out toward the porch where rain quietly fell onto the waterlogged vegetable garden. "I didn't dare beg anyone. I only wanted a place to settle down and repay my debt to life before closing my eyes forever. His voice trembled, but his eyes shone with an unmistakable sincerity. Then in a moment that stunned the entire house into silence, Alex suddenly dropped to his knees before Mary and her mother. Mary cried out in alarm, "Sir, what are you doing?" Linda hurried to stand as well, but Alex remained kneeling, his bony hands clasped together, bowing deeply. "I ask permission to stay," he said, "not to live off your food, but to do any work I can to atone for my debts to this world." The simple words cut straight to the heart. The house fell utterly silent, filled only with the wind sighing through the torn thatch and the rain soaking into the earth. Mary clenched her fists, overwhelmed by a feeling she couldn't name. She looked at Linda, her stern, quiet, yet compassionate mother. Their eyes met in a shared understanding that needed no words. Linda slowly sat down, poured another cup of tea, and pushed it toward BY. Her voice was low but full of kindness. "Get up. My house is poor, but we've never turned away someone who comes with sincerity." Alex rose slowly, his eyes glistening. Outside, the rain seemed to soften, droplets falling gently on the broad green banana leaves. A late drizzling night, a life story soaked in tears, and three people quietly finding a rare warmth in one another. No one spoke further, but each of them understood that from this moment on, their fates were bound together by invisible threads, by trust, compassion, and wounds long left unhealed. A new night had begun, no longer just a drizzle, but a cleansing rain, washing away the knots of the past to open a new path ahead, full of hardship, yet also full of hope. At dawn, while the village still dozed in the damp chill left behind by the night, a strange letter appeared at the gate of Mary's house. The yellowed envelope, sealed with crude glue, lay silently on the dirt like a hidden trap waiting to spring. When Mary opened the door to sweep the yard, she nearly stepped on it. She bent down carefully to pick it up, unease rising for no clear reason. Scrawled in black ink on the envelope were the words, "To the family harboring a criminal." Her hands trembled, her palms cold and slick with sweat, though morning dew still clung to the grapefruit branches in the yard. Hearing the noise, Linda hurried out. Her aging eyes narrowed when she saw the letter. "What is it, child?" Mary pressed her lips together and handed it to her mother. Linda slowly opened it. In the dim light, they read the unsigned scrawled lines. "The whole village knows that old man fled here from the district town to escape his debts. Harboring him will only bring disaster. Don't blame the world for turning its back on you." Linda fell silent. The morning breeze stirred her hair, lifting strands of silver. A chill crept through Mary's body. She clenched her hands and looked toward the kitchen, where Alex was busy starting the fire to boil water. Inside, her doubt and compassion tore at each other like a rising and receding tide. Before long, the village buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Aunt Ba washing bowls, Uncle Tem sweeping his yard, Aunt Sue hauling water. Everyone whispered to one another. Rumors spread like fire through dry straw, fast and fierce. "They say that old man scammed countless people in the district town. Keeping someone like that will bring calamity. That Mary girl is so foolish. Who trusts strangers these days?" The murmurs slipped through every path, every hibiscus hedge, into every mealtime beneath the sagging, thatched roofs. T-Min Mary's hot-tempered cousin heard the news at the ferry dock and rushed back. His clothes were splattered with mud, sweat pouring down his face as he stormed into the yard. "Sister Mary, you have to kick that old man out right now. Keeping him here will get us dragged down with him." Linda sat motionless, staring into the distance, as if lost in heavy thought. Mary bit her lip until it bled, forcing herself to stay calm. "Min, we should at least hear him explain." "Explain what?" Min snapped. "The accusation letter says it all. You're still going to defend him." His raised voice drew curious neighbors to cluster at the gate. At that moment, Alex stepped out, carrying the kettle of fresh water. Seeing the scene, he paused. He said nothing, only quietly set the kettle down on the table, his eyes heavy with sorrow as they passed over each face. Mary turned to him hesitantly. Sir, do you have anything to say? Alex lifted his gaze to the young woman. His eyes were deep, weary, but unwavering. That letter speaks part of the truth, he said in a low voice. The yard fell silent. Linda gripped the hem of her old blouse. Alex continued slowly. I did owe people, but not money. I owed trust. I owed those who once believed in me, especially after I myself trusted the wrong person. He sighed, the sound like wind slipping through old bamboo walls. Before I left the town, I apologized to everyone. I could repaid all that I was able. What remains is a debt of honor I've carried ever since. T-Min scoffed. You talk well enough, but who's going to believe you? Alex didn't get angry. He only looked at Mary, his eyes kindling a fragile spark of hope. If you still believe me, let me clear these rumors myself. Mary choked back tears, her heart a tangled mess. In a small village like this, rumors were like snakes. The more you struck them, the more they multiplied. She knew that a single stain could follow a person for life. At the end of the lane, a shadowy figure lurked behind thin bamboo, a stranger sneaking watchful, clearly not from the village. Mary frowned, a bad feeling tightening in her chest. How are you going to do that? She asked, her voice trembling. Alex smiled, a smile that was neither happy nor sad, only like a fleeting glimmer skimming across cold water. I will find the one behind that letter, he said firmly. Outside, the weak sun slowly tore through the veil of fog. The first rays of light slipped through the gaps between leaves, but inside Mary's heart, the clouds were still thick and unbroken. She glanced at Linda, her elderly mother, who stood with her hands clasped before her chest, eyes tightly shut as if silently praying for a small miracle amid the storms about to descend. That morning, after days of relentless rain, the sky finally showed a pale hint of sunshine. The dirt road leading to the bus stop was still dotted with small puddles. Mary secretly wrapped some cold food in a faded handkerchief, her heart fluttering as if fire burned beneath her feet. Alex waited at the head of the lane holding a worn cloth bag. His face was quiet, like that of someone about to step into a misty past. He said nothing, only nodded slightly when he saw Mary approach. They walked briskly along the sunken road where deep wheel ruts were still pressed into the mud. Sparrows chirped noisily in the hedges at the village entrance, mixed with the rattling roar of an old three-wheeled taxi revving its engine, ready to take passengers. Where are we going, sir? Mary asked hesitantly. To look for answers, Alex replied shortly, his gaze distant. They climbed onto the vehicle. It jolted and swayed like a boat caught midstream in fast currents. The elderly driver, wearing a scuffed pith helmet, flicked on a cheap radio that played old crackling songs. The voices blurred in the wind, drawing them both into a faraway realm of memories. By the time they reached the town, the sun was high, scattering patches of yellow light across the blotched pavement. The small town was bustling. Rows of low-tiled roof houses, faded signboards, tiny grocery shops, and sidewalk coffee stalls crowded together. Alex led Mary through narrow alleys, ducking beneath wide-spreading almond trees. They stopped in front of an old gold shop, its red-painted sign peeling badly, Hoist Endless Gold Shop. The door creaked open. An elderly man with white hair and a thin but agile frame looked up from behind the glass counter. His eyes suddenly lit up, then quickly dimmed. Is that Mr. B.Y. Kong? His voice trembled. Alex smiled gently, not a joyful smile, but one belonging to a man who had weathered countless storms. Hello, Mr. Chun, he said in a low voice. Mr. Chan Hua L.C. hurried out from behind the counter, gripping B.Y. Ha's hand tightly and shaking it again and again, as if afraid the man might vanish. Good heavens, I thought you were gone for good. For years, no one heard anything about you. Alex only smiled, saying nothing more. Mary stood silently beside them, eyes wide, her heart churning. While Mr. Chun poured tea, Mary noticed the photographs covering the walls. One large photo in an old wooden frame caught her eye. It showed a row of well-dressed men posing together in front of a grand building. Standing prominently at the centers was a tall, middle-aged man with a dignified face dressed neatly and elegantly. That man was B.Y. Ha. Mary froze. She stepped back, feeling as if an electric shock ran down her spine. In an instant, all the doubts and gossip blurred and faded. Mr. Cheen muttered as he poured tea. "Mr. Bio, I hear used to be the biggest timber merchant in this region." People treated him like an honored guest. Every businessman in that photo respected him. Alex waved his hand lightly, sadness flickering in his eyes. "That's all in the past. Talking about it only stirs pain." Mary looked at the old man. For the first time, she didn't see the ragged figure of a beggar, but the calm bearing of someone who had lost everything yet still preserved his dignity. After bidding Mr. Chan farewell, Alex continued leading Mary through a few more streets. They stopped at an old boarding house with a sagging tin roof and mold-stained pillars, weathered by years of sun and rain. The landlady, a small, framed woman, stared in shock when she saw B.Y. Ha. "Heavens, Mr. B.Y., it's been so many years. I thought you died somewhere." She bustled about, pulling out chairs, warmly inviting them to sit, recounting stories from the past. "Back then, Mr. B.Y. rented a room over there. Every day people came asking to buy timber place in orders. Everyone in this neighborhood respected him." Mary listened, her heart racing, as if more and more pieces were being added to the picture of the mysterious man before her. When they left the boarding house, Alex stood still for a long time before an old solitary almond tree. He placed his hand on the trunk, his fingers trembling as if searching for something buried deep in the past. "Here," he said softly, "is where I lost everything." Mary tightened her grip on the handkerchief. A wave of sorrow rose in her chest, choking her as if she herself had shared in his loss. They headed back toward the bus station. Along the quiet road, the late afternoon sun slanted yellow and dull dust swirling in the air. Suddenly, a hand landed on Mary's shoulder. She jumped and spun around. In front of her stood a strange man wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face. His breath reeked of tobacco. He leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Don't believe everything you see." Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd, swift as a gust of wind. Mary stood rooted to the ground, her heart pounding. Alex stepped up and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. His expression was calm, but his eyes gleamed with resolve. "Let's go. This isn't over yet." The town's sky faded in the last sunlight, and inside Mary a silent storm began to form, ready to sweep away every fragile belief she had just begun to nurture. The sky grew heavy, with gray, dark clouds rolling in waves like torn carpets about to collapse. A strong wind swept in from the fields, carrying a damp, earthy smell that signaled an approaching storm. Mary and Alex hurried along the slippery dirt road. Her old plastic sandals stuck fast in the mud, each step heavy. Leaves along the roadside rustled and trembled in the wind, as if sensing the looming danger. As soon as they turned into the small lane leading home, Mary felt the unusual tension. Several neighboring women huddled at the tea stall at the lane's entrance, murmuring among themselves, then falling silent when they saw Mary and Alex appear. Their cold, curious gazes converged on the two of them. Mary swallowed hard. She knew the malicious rumors had reached home faster than her own footsteps. The moment she stepped into the yard, Aunt Sualu confronted her with a heavy look. Her face tightened, worry etched into every wrinkle. "Where have you been all day without saying a word?" Her hoarse voice carried both anger and concern. "I went to town with Mr. B.Y. for a bit," Mary replied softly, wringing her blouse until it was crumpled. Before Linda could speak, hurried footsteps and the slap of sandals sounded from the lane. A group of people entered the yard, led by Uncle Tim Tom and Aunt Bali Yu. Everyone looked grim, as if something serious was about to erupt. Uncle Tim planted his cane and stared straight at Aunt Sue, his voice booming. "Sister Sue, we care about you and Mary, so we came to make things clear. You can't just shelter a strange and end up being fooled blind." Aunt Baliu chimed in sharply. "The whole neighborhood is talking. This man isn't some poor soul. They say he's a fallen rich man pretending to be destitute to trick people out of land and houses trying to seize our fields. The words stealing land and taking houses struck Mary's heart like icy blades. T-Min rushed out from inside his face, flushed with anger. Mom, what are you waiting for? Kick him out already, letting people talk like this. Who will ever want to marry Mary? Linda stood frozen. Mary turned to B.Y. Ha. The old man stood there, hands clasped behind his back, his face solemn like a stone statue. In the flashes of lightning outside, his white hair looked even more forlorn. A strong gust slammed the gate shut with a dry crack. No one spoke. The air grew so thick it felt as if a single spark could ignite a fierce argument. Finally, Linda spoke, slow but firm. If you are sincere, then let everyone know who you really are. Otherwise, I don't know how I can keep you here. A distant clap of thunder rolled like a warning from the heavens. Alex silently stepped into the house. Everyone fell, quiet eyes following his every step. Moments later, he returned, holding tightly the old wooden chest he had guarded like a treasure for so long. He set the chest down on the brick courtyard. The sound of wood hitting stone echoed coldly. In here, he said gravely, is the answer to what you want to know. No one spoke. Even T-Min stood with his mouth agape, fists clenched. Alex opened the lid. The dim oil lamp light revealed the contents, a worn silk odiche, a stack of yellow documents, several faded photographs, and a handwritten letter blurred by age and water stains. He took each item out in turn, slowly, as if recounting chapters of a life long past. Here, he raised a certificate of ownership for a timber business. This is my past. And here, he lifted a photo of himself with prosperous merchants, or the people who once called me comrade. He paused, exhaling deeply as if releasing a heavy burden. And this, he opened the handwritten letter, is a message from my younger brother, the one who sold me out for wealth and comfort. His voice dropped. I didn't come here to seize land, nor do I have the strength left to fight for anything. I only seek a place to live in peace, waiting for the clouds to part and the sun to return. His words were gentle yet heavy as stone. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering hard against the thatched roof like a series of sighs from the sky. Aunt Baliu lowered her head slightly. Uncle Tim Tom shifted awkwardly and coughed, turning away. T-Min bit his lip, avoiding everyone's eyes. Mary looked around, a deep compassion swelling in her chest. She knew that from this moment on, no further justification was needed. But just as the tension seemed to ease, a shout rang out from the lane. Don't let sweet words blind you. Who can be sure he won't pull the same trick again? Everyone turned. A strange man stood there wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a faded raincoat, hands on his hips amid the drifting rain. His face was swallowed by the darkness. Only his eyes flashed with hatred. Alex clenched his hand against the side of the wooden chest, his gaze no longer carrying its usual calm. He straightened up like a tree that had once bent beneath storms and was now ready to face another. Thunder roared again, lightning tearing across the gloomy sky. And in that instant, amid wind and rain, some great truth waited to be revealed. The oil lamp flickered in the drizzling night, casting a small halo of light over faces half lit, half shadowed. The smell of damp earth mixed with the smoky scent of smoldering straw, fires from nearby kitchens, weighing heavily in the air. In the rain-spattered brick courtyard, Alex slowly knelt beside the old wooden chest. His thin hands trembled as he carefully unwrapped each layer of oilcloth inside. All eyes fixed on him, breath held. From the bottom of the chest, he took out a thick stack of documents wrapped in yellowed plastic. He raised them high for everyone to see. These are my land deeds, notarized property papers, and my old license to run the timber mill, he said. His voice was hoarse but steady, each word ringing out like a nail driven into wood through the damp air. Linda stood beside Mary, clutching her blouse tightly, eyes wide. The villagers, from Uncle Tim Tom and Aunt Baliu to the young men who had been shouting in moments earlier, fell completely silent. Only the rain drummed on the thatched roof. A commune official who had been among the crowd from the start stepped forward. The middle-aged man wearing a white shirt shone a flashlight directly onto the papers, flipping through each page carefully. The beam swept across lines of text in bright red official seals, legitimate documents. In a low voice, the official confirmed, "These are authentic, notarized papers from before liberation. The signatures and seals match the records kept at the commune office." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd like bubbles rising on a rain-dimpled pond. A few people whispered to one another, exchanging uneasy glances. Alex then took out an old photograph. The edges were worn and faded, but the image was still clear. A handsome young man in a neat suit stood among a large group of merchants behind them, a wooden sign reading CIS in Town Merchants Council. "The man in this photo," he said, holding it up, "is me. Back then, I didn't just own a timber mill. I was also chairman of the local Merchants Council." Everyone stood stunned. The image of the ragged old beggar who had once asked for food by the roadside suddenly transformed into a once prominent mill owner, leaving the crowd flushed and awkward. Alex lifted his eyes to the people before him. They were deep and heavy with sorrow, like a river in the dry season. "I lost everything," he said quietly. "I lost it because of the younger brother I loved, the one I entrusted with my property. He secretly sold it all just to buy himself a few years of luxury. By the time I discovered it, I had nothing left. No assets, no honor, no face to return to my old home." And the rain fell harder. Heavy drops pounding onto clothes, seeping cold into the skin, yet no one moved for shelter. The entire courtyard, the entire village was silent. Only hearts stirred. Alex bowed his head, his trembling hand gently stroking the old photograph. "I didn't come here to seize land or houses. I only wanted to find a place, somewhere people still have compassion, so I could live out my final days in peace." He lifted his head, his eyes red from wind, rain, and tears. "If you still don't believe me, I'm ready to pack up and leave. I won't hold any resentment." Mary choked back sobs. She looked at Linda Lu and saw tears glistening in the old woman's eyes as well. Linda stepped forward, her trembling hand resting on B.Y. Ha's shoulder, her voice breaking. "Mr. B.Y., please stop. Stay here with us. My home may be poor, but there's still human kindness." Soft sniffles rose from the crowd. Uncle Tim Tom scratched his head awkwardly and turned away, avoiding the old man's gaze. Aunt Balayu quietly wiped her tears with the hem of her faded brown shirt. T-Min, who had once insisted on driving Alex away, now stood with his head lowered and his face a mix of regret and shame. Amid the confused faces, a clap rang out. It was Old Man Tu Kun, the most toothless elder in the village. In his shrill voice, he said, "A man who was once a boss, now wearing a torn hat and sleeping on sidewalks, yet still keeps his manners and decency. He's more honorable than plenty of folks who parade around in fine clothes. How many people in this world can keep a heart like that?" A second clap followed, then a third scattered at first, then joining into a chain. The atmosphere warmed like hardened mud, softening under sunlight. Alex dropped to his knees, clasping his hands toward the crowd, his voice trembling. "I'm deeply grateful. I ask only for a roof over my head to live out the rest of my life. Please don't turn your backs on me again." Outside, the rain began to thin, giving way to the earthy scent of wet soil and the chorus of frogs calling the season. A flash of lightning cut across the sky, but this time it wasn't fierce, just a gentle streak of light guiding hearts, still holding doubt toward understanding. That night, Mary's small thatched house, though poor, felt warmer than ever. And in each person's heart, it was as if a violent storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet peace soft as early winter dew. The sun had not fully risen yet. Only thin rays of light filtered through the hedge in front of the house, washing the dirt yard in pale gold. The morning breeze was light, rustling through the ripe rice stalks behind the house, whispering faintly. Alex sat pensively on a rickety bamboo chair. Before him was a pot of tea gone cold since the night before. He gazed toward the winding dirt road leading to the market village, his eyes heavy with thought, half watching passers-by, half reflecting on his life. Inside the small house, Mary busied herself lighting the stove while Linda bent over picking vegetables, her hands moving with years-old habit, though her mind was unsettled. A light cough broke the silence. Mary looked up toward the yard. The old man had risen, leaning on his cane. Though frail, his eyes shone with an unshakable resolve. "Mary, Aunt Sue," he said in a low but firm voice, "I have something I need to say." Linda set the basket of vegetables down and wiped her hands on her faded blouse. She and Mary stepped out into the yard. Alex bowed deeply solemnly like someone performing an old ritual. "I owe Mary and Aunt Sue more than I can ever repay saving my life taking me in. No bowl of rice or piece of clothing could make up for it." He lifted his head, his eyes gleaming with determination. "I still own a small plot of land outside the town. I bought it years ago for my old age. Now I have no more wishes. I want to sell that land and use the money to repair this house so the two of you won't have to suffer so much." Linda gasped and hurriedly waved her hands. "No, Mr. BY, that won't do. We may be poor, but we still have our strength. How could we take such a heavy favor?" Her voice choked, her eyes darting around as if afraid the neighbors might hear and laugh. Mary was flustered too, clutching her blouse, hesitating. "Mr. BY, we truly respect you," she said softly, "but accepting something like that would make us forever indebted." Alex gently shook his head, a smile as faint as morning dew at the mouth of an alley. "True gratitude is not a debt. I ask the two of you to give me a chance to repay not with money, but with the little humanity I have left in my life." His voice suddenly caught. "I've lived this long and lost everything. My home, my loved ones, my reputation. All that remains is a small faith in human kindness. If I can't repay this kindness, I'll carry that debt with me to the grave and never find peace." Linda turned away, wiping her tears. Her thin back trembled slightly in the fresh sunlight. Mary looked at the old man standing there in the sunlit yard, her heart tightening. In his weary eyes, she saw not only gratitude, but also a desperate longing to do one last good deed, as if to atone for a lifetime. The silence stretched on, broken only by the soft wind brushing through the cornfield behind the house. Suddenly, hurried footsteps echoed from the end of the lane. A child burst into the yard panting. "Aunt Sue! Sister Mary!" Something happened in the upper hamlet. All three startled. "What happened?" Mary asked anxiously. "Mr. Bialum, the former landowner from town, he's just come back. He's looking for someone named BYHA. He says there's something big he wants to confront." The child finished and gasped for breath as if he had run a long way. The air in the yard grew heavy like storm clouds gathering before a downpour. Alex tightened his grip on his cane. His old weathered eyes suddenly lit with a strange glimmer. "So, the time has come," he murmured. Linda frowned. "BYLM, the one you used to mention." Alex nodded slowly, lips pressed tight. "Yes, he's the one who pushed me into the abyss." Mary held his hand. "Uncle B, do you need to go meet him, or—" He shook his head, calm to an uncanny degree. "Run once and you'll never be at peace for the rest of your life. Better to let everything come into the open right here in front of the villagers." The first seasonal wind swept through, carrying the faint scent of ripening rice. Once again, the poor little yard was about to witness another storm. But this time, Alex was no longer alone. Beside him were sincere people, just a few gray heads and simple hearts. Mary squeezed the old man's hand tightly, a wordless promise. Whatever lay ahead, they would walk it together. A battered old motorbike sputtered to a stop in front of Mary's gate, coughing thick smoke. The rear wheels sank slightly into the muddy ground left soft by last night's rain. The rider, a burly man with dark, weather-beaten skin like a forest laborer, swung his leg down and yanked off his helmet roughly. He strode into the yard, clutching a crumpled stack of papers, his shifty eyes scanning every startled face. B.Y. Ha, who had been clearing dry straw on the porch, looked up. At the sight of the man, his brow creased, a ripple of unease flashing through his eyes. The stranger didn't greet anyone. He snarled, "Who's B.I. Ha? Come out here and explain yourself." Mary rushed forward to stand in front of the old man, her face tense. Linda hurried out of the house as well, still holding an old conical hat. "I am B.Y. Hapa." The old man spoke up, his voice gentle but steady, without fear. The stranger stepped closer and flung the papers to the ground arrogantly. "Read this. Your crimes are serious, stealing land from my family, then pretending to be a beggar to deceive the whole village." The accusation hit like a thunderclap in the yard. Neighbors, hearing the commotion, poured in and crowded at the gate, whispering among themselves. Faces paled. Mary clenched her fists until her knuckles turned white. Alex said nothing. He slowly bent down, picked up the papers, and examined them one by one. The sheets were stained by rain, the handwriting sloppy, an accusation with no official seal, only vague signatures. The old man gave a faint, bitter smile. "I don't run from my past. If you have proof, bring it to the commune office." The stranger sneered. "You're good at covering your tracks, but my family remembers. You once seized land by the river that belonged to my great-grandfather." Alex shook his head. "That land was purchased, legally notarized with witnesses. Generations have passed, and you're still dragging it up." The man's face flushed red as he shouted back, "You tricked them into selling cheap. Now you live in peace while my nephews have to work as hired hands." Murmurs spread through the crowd, suspicious looks, slow shakes of the head. Trouble rose again, spreading like an oil slick across still water. Linda gripped Mary's hand and whispered anxiously, "Will it be okay this time?" Mary pressed her lips together firmly. "I trust Uncle B.Y." In the stifling air, Alex quietly went inside and brought out an old wooden chest. He opened it and took out another bundle of documents, this time stamped clearly with official seals. He handed them to a commune officer who had just arrived after hearing the noise. The officer carefully examined each page. After a long moment, he looked up and announced clearly, "These documents are valid. The land in question was legally purchased, properly notarized before liberation. No one has the right to reclaim it." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. The stranger went pale. He stammered incoherently, then spun around, jumped on his motorbike, and sped off, leaving behind a twisting trail of gray, smoke-like stains from a tainted past. The crowd dispersed quietly. No one spoke. Only the wind whispered through the bamboo hedges like a long sigh. Alex stood still in the yard, neither happy nor sad. He looked up at the gloomy sky, where heavy clouds drifted slowly. Linda stepped closer. "There now, Uncle B.Y. It's over. No one in the village believes that nonsense." Mary's eyes brimmed with tears. "Please don't be deceived. We've always believed in you." Alex smiled a sorrowful smile. "Thank you, ma'am. But when people choose to doubt, no amount of proof is enough. As long as my conscience is clear, that's enough for me." Leaning on his cane, he slowly walked toward the pond behind the house. Dusk fell quickly. The last week's sunlight stretched across the still water. Late-season winds rustled softly, carrying the sharp scent of fresh mud. Alex sat down on the grassy bank, gazing into the distance. His solitary figure cast a long reflection on the rippling surface. He sat there for a long time, one arm hugging his knee, the other idly turning his wooden cane as if stirring old memories. Golden days, years of wandering wounds of the heart that never fully healed, all surged back, salting old scars. Yet amid all that wreckage, a gentle light still flickered, kindness, human warmth, and an unextinguished faith. No matter how stormy the past had been, in this moment by the old pond, a small peace was taking root enough to stand against a lifetime of hardship. He closed his eyes, letting the wind brush his aged face, letting memories drift away, with the ripples whispering to himself that as long as one lives decently, life will not betray them. The afternoon grew dim. The sky hung low with gray clouds pressing down on the quiet village. From afar came the chirping of crickets, rising and falling with a lonely sadness. Under the slanted thatched porch, Linda sat curled on a worn wooden chair, slowly mending a faded brown shirt. The needle went up and down, stitching together tears left by time. But tears cannot be mended. They slid silently down her deeply lined face. In the corner of the yard, Alex sat quietly on the earthen step, his eyes emptied of the burdens he had carried through years of wandering. No one spoke. Mary sat beside him, hugging her knees. The wind lifted her long hair in the fading light. Suddenly, as if summoning all his courage, Alex stood up and slowly walked toward Linda and Mary. He clasped his hands and bowed deeply, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I'm sorry. Because of me, your family had to endure so much gossip. I know no apology can make it right, but I have never stopped regretting it." His voice broke. The once proud man now looked like a lost child, trembling hands clutching his sleeve. Mary burst into tears, unable to hold them back. Her sobs shattered the still afternoon, filling every listener's heart with indescribable sorrow. Linda set the half-mended shirt on her lap and wiped her tears with her sleeve. She looked at Alex for a long time, then spoke gently as if soothing him. "Uncle B, what's past is past. In this small village, who hasn't stumbled at least once? What matters is an upright heart, loyalty, and gratitude. Our family is poor, but we value kindness above all." Mary choked up, adding, "Uncle BY, this house will always be your home." Those words were like rain on barren ground. Alex collapsed, kneeling on the earth, crying like a child. The tears of old age, heavy with years of loneliness, helplessness, and the longing to be accepted. A breeze from the fields carried the earthy scent of wet soil after last night's rain. From the end of the lane came the clatter of old bicycles and slow footsteps. Familiar figures appeared at the gate. Aunt Bay, Uncle Tim, Aunt Nom, longtime neighbors, carrying sweet potatoes, pomelos, bundles of water, spinach still beaded with dew. They stopped in the yard, scratching their heads shyly. Finally, Aunt Ba gathered her courage and spoke. "Uncle BY, we heard rumors and we doubted at times. But seeing how gentle and quiet you are, we feel ashamed. This is just a little homegrown produce. Please accept it as our sincerity." She hurriedly set the basket down. Uncle Tom smiled warmly. "Our village may be poor, but we've never lacked affection, right? Uncle BY." Everyone smiled bashfully, carrying the simple, heartfelt sincerity of country folk. Warmth slowly spread, chasing away the cold that had weighed on the poor thatched house. Alex looked up, eyes wet, voice trembling. I, I'm deeply grateful. I don't dare accept much, but this kindness I will remember for the rest of my life." The women gathered around, helping Mary lay the gifts out on a mat in the yard. Nothing fancy, just vegetables, sweet potatoes, rice crackers. Yet within them was a warmth of human kindness, more enduring than gold or silver. At that very moment, the sound of a motorbike echoed from the dirt lane. A man wearing a crisp white shirt and black slacks, a commune officer's badge pinned to his chest, calmly stopped his bike in front of the yard. He removed his helmet, greeted everyone, and walked straight up to BY Haya. "Hello, Uncle BY. My name is LC, a commune officer. I've heard about your situation and have been following it for the past few days. The commune has a small matter we hope you can help us." Alex was taken aback. "I'm old now. What help could I possibly be to the village, to the commune?" Mr. LC smiled. "We're setting up a project to build a new community hall. People here aren't familiar with paperwork and procedures. We heard you used to be a businessman and know documents well, so we'd like to ask you to step in and assist." The entire yard fell silent for a moment. Linda and Mary looked at each other, their eyes shining with joy. The neighbors murmured and nodded in agreement. Alex clasped his hands behind his back and looked up at the sky, now turning a deep crimson at dusk. A gentle breeze rustled the banana leaves behind the house like a melody, announcing a new beginning. The old man smiled, serene smile he had not known since his wandering days began. If the villagers still trust me, I'll give everything I have left to repay this land that has sheltered me. The afternoon sunlight spilled across the yellow pomelo tree, glinting like threads of heaven tangled in the old man's silver hair. Tomorrow there might still be gossip, still doubtful glances, but in Bibai-Ha's heart he now had a home. People bound not by blood, yet closer than family. He knew that from this moment on, he would no longer walk the last stretch of his life alone. That morning the sun had just risen above the village bamboo hedge, casting pale golden rays that gently caressed rooftops and rice fields, still damp with dew. It was a strange morning, because from early on, the whole small village buzzed like a festival day. Temple bells rang softly in the cool morning breeze. Voices called out to one another. Barefoot children laughed and ran. The clang of hammers echoed across the communal yard. Today, the village courtyard wore a new look, bright with flags and banners fluttering overhead. The old almond tree at the entrance, having shed its leaves through countless seasons, seemed greener than ever, shading the salt and pepper hair of the elderly and the eager eyes of children. Under that broad canopy, Alex stood quietly in his worn brown shirt, leaning on his bamboo cane. His face glowed with a rare happiness light born from deep within his heart, not from outward glory. Beside him stood Mary and Linda Lu, the only family he had found in this world. Through a twist of fate he would always be grateful for. A large sign stood in the center of the yard, simple yet solemn groundbreaking ceremony for Hung Thani Village School. The bright red letters on white cloth flapped in the wind. Commune officials, elderly teachers, village heads, Aunt Ba, Uncle Tim, everyone was present, neatly dressed and smiling. The children could hardly contain their excitement, waving small flags and hopping around the yard. When the handheld loudspeaker crackled to life, Mr. LC stepped forward, his voice clear and strong. Dear villagers, today is an important day for our community. Thanks to the quiet, heartfelt contribution of Uncle Bui Ha, the school we've dreamed of for so long can finally begin construction. May our children now be able to learn right here on their own land. Thunderous applause erupted, mixed with whistling cheers from young men. Bui-Ha's hands trembled slightly as he stepped up to speak. He hadn't stood before a crowd like this in decades, not since his business collapsed. Mary came up and took his hand, squeezing it tightly, silently lending him strength. Linda stood nearby, nodding encouragement. Alex took a deep breath and spoke slowly, his voice hoarse but firm. I'm just an old man with nothing left to lose. But this land, these people have given me a family, a home. I offer what little remains of my life to help build a future for this village. I hope the children who come after us won't have to cross rivers and fields just to learn their letters like we once did. His voice faltered and the entire courtyard fell silent. In that moment, people no longer saw a lonely old man, but a heart shining like sunlight after a storm. Applause burst out again, shaking the air. Commune officials stepped forward solemnly to present Alex with a simple certificate of appreciation heavy with meaning. Women from the village bustled about, bringing green vegetables, sticky rice fruit to welcome guests. The children crowded around Alex like he was a benevolent spirit from a fairy tale, shouting eagerly, "Uncle B, when will the school be finished so we can go study? Uncle B, will you teach me how to write someday?" Alex laughed, in a gentle laugh that erased the deep lines of hardship from his brow. He bent down, patting each child's head, his eyes overflowing with affection. His heart felt as light as a kite filled with wind, like sweat poured into the fields that would one day yield a sweet harvest. Linda put her hands on her hips and joked, "Uncle B, you're more famous than the commune chairman now." Everyone burst out laughing. The sound carried all the way to the bamboo groves at the edge of the village. As afternoon faded, the first baskets of soil were poured, the first bricks laid. People worked shoulder to shoulder, hoes, shovels. buckets of water in hand. Everyone was drenched in sweat, yet their eyes shone with joy. In the hazy evening smoke, B.Y. Ha's figure stood out slow but steady, like the old almond tree at the yard's entrance that had shaded generations. Mary stepped up beside him, still holding his hand. She looked up and spoke softly, warmly. "From now on, our home won't be lonely anymore, Uncle B.Y." Alex looked at the young woman he loved like his own granddaughter, eyes glistening. He nodded without a word, simply tightening his grip on her small hand. From a chance meeting beneath an almond tree, from an old loaf of bread, from the unconditional kindness of a poor young woman, a wandering old man rediscovered the value of his life. From someone once lost in the world, he became the one nurturing the future seedlings of the very land where he had once despaired. As the sound of digging rang out, as distant rice fields rippled in the wind, as smiles and loving glances spread across the communal yard, Alex knew he had truly come home at last. Tomorrow, the village school would slowly take shape. Tomorrow, children would chatter their way to class to the lively beat of the school drum. And tomorrow he would sit under the thatched porch listening to children practice reading, listening as if to his own heart, being reborn in love, forgiveness, and hope. On old soil, a truly new day had begun. Life is sometimes like drifting on muddy waters. To reach a peaceful shore, we need more than strength alone. We need faith, compassion, and a heart wide enough to forgive. From Uncle B.Y. Hayes' story, I've learned that in a world full of storms, only sincere human kindness can save souls that have gone astray. When we treat one another with kindness and trust, even the deepest wounds will someday heal. And sometimes what we give away seems small, like an old loaf of bread or a simple place to rest, yet it can become the hand that rescues an entire life. If Mary had turned away that day, if Linda had closed the door out of fear of gossip, perhaps Uncle Alex would have spent the rest of his days in loneliness and regret. So I want to ask you, if tomorrow you meet a stranger in need, will you choose to open your heart or turn away? The answer may not only decide their fate, but also the kind of person you will become. Kindness is like sunlight, quietly shining, unseen, yet warm enough to embrace the whole world. If today's story moved you, please leave a 1 in the comments. What province or city are you watching from? I'd love to hear your voice. If you have a different perspective or a similar real-life story, don't hesitate to share it below. And if you enjoy emotional everyday stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so we can meet again in future tales. See you in the next story.